Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. His forearm jammed across Mara's path and my stomach dropped. She didn't slow, she planted and faced him with that stubborn tilt. I'm Alex, 28, and I knew the look meant trouble. He smiled without warmth and shifted closer, like he owned the doorway. Move, she said, chin up and feet set. He grazed her wrist with two lazy fingers and watched me. Her jaw flexed and she peeled his hand off quick. I felt the room lean toward us like weather about to break. He leaned in again and tested her space with his chest. She slid left and tried the online wrist turn she drilled. He flowed with it and caught her elbow-high clean trap. A tiny gasp escaped her mouth and stabbed my spine. Easy, I said, palms lifted so he could count them. He tugged her toward the hall and grinned for the crowd. Mara stomped at his instep and clipped rubber, not bone. He barely twitched and tightened, eyes glittering with dumb confidence. People noticed and pretended not to, heads turning like dials. The bouncer was pinned at the entrance by another mess. I shifted right to split his attention and Mara read it. She jerked backward hard and his grip slipped half an inch. He reached for my collar and I ducked late, knuckles skimmed. Mara snapped a palm to his throat and he flinched. He shoved her into a table and glass exploded like hail. I tasted copper and heard three voices argue about nothing. She shook loose and posted on a chair to get angle. Let him go, I tried again but louder this time. He laughed short, ugly, and squared his stance like showtime. My pulse hammered a warning I should have honored earlier. Mara's breath went thin and fast and her eyes went flat. That was her tell, fight still on but confidence wobbling. I took a wide step to his blind side and waited. He turned with me and forgot about her for one beat. Her knee flashed up and buried into his thigh, solid hit. He cursed and lurched, balance gone for a heartbeat. I grabbed his sleeve and yanked across his center line. He stumbled 2 steps and decided he hated me more. Out, I said, voice steady because fear needs orders. He cracked his neck like a cartoon tough guy and advanced. Mara's hand slid into her pocket and came out closed. He didn't notice, but I did, and everything narrowed. Her fist opened and the kin flashed between her knuckles. He lunged at me and bunched fabric near my throat. I drove my forearm up and knocked his grip loose. Mara snapped the nozzle toward his face and paused, half breath, then fired. The mist hit full and his eyes squeezed shut. He clawed at his cheeks and stumbled into a chair. I moved in to finish the break and clear space. He swung blind and caught my temple anyway, stars, then rage. Back up, I spread my stance and blocked his next swipe. Mara reset the spray and tracked him like a target. He wheezed curses that didn't sound like words anymore. The room hushed, then swelled again, heat rising, pressure building. A heavy shape pushed through bodies and cleared a path. The security guy finally reached our circle with arms wide. Hands visible, his tone cut through noise like a blade. The jerk flinched at the voice and jerked sideways toward us. I stepped left and forced his angle off Mara. He tried to bolt past but clipped a stool and folded. Mara didn't chase, she posted near my shoulder and waited. We held our ground while he thrashed and blinked. On the floor, the guard moved in with quick steps. The jerk ignored it and grabbed at my shoe. I stomped his wrist down and felt tendons shift. He yowled and finally rolled over to save his hand. Zip sounds flicked through the noise and the fight sagged. The guard cuffed one wrist and fought for the other. Mara hovered close and kept the kin trained. I kept my balance ready because chaos loves company. 2 friends of his pushed forward with big mouths. Cut it out, one pointed at me and puffed up. The other reached for Mara and froze at the nozzle. I stared him down until his shoulders sank a notch. Police inbound, the guard nodded without looking up. I heard the word inbound and mapped exits in my head. Mara touched my elbow once and held the touch. I felt the tremor and knew bravado was gone. The jerk tried one last twist and ate carpet. I pressed a knee near his shoulder and waited. He spat insults into the floor and ran out of air. The sound faded and fear rushed in to replace it. Enough, Mara's voice was clipped and steady. She lowered the can but didn't pocket it yet. My heartbeat eased and anger cooled into focus. That focus would turn on me soon enough. Sirens swelled outside and the room finally exhaled. The guard nodded again and checked the cuffs. He waved us toward the side exit with 2 fingers. I felt relief and a fresh dread all at once. We stepped into the corridor and let the noise shrink. Mara leaned on the wall and swallowed hard. I hesitated before the spray, her eyes didn't blink. I knew she wanted me to admit something worse. You moved when it counted, I kept my voice level. She shook her head once and stared past me. I wanted it to be easy and clean, the truth hurt. That truth would come back when the lights were off. Footsteps clattered behind us and a uniform appeared. Questions started and the clock seemed to slow. I answered short because details felt like traps. Mara did the same and squeezed my sleeve under the radar. They hauled him past with his stare burning holes. He tried to spit more words and got nowhere. His friends melted away like the courage had a timer. I knew the night was not finished with us yet. Outside air hit and my skull throbbed in rhythm. Mara flexed her fingers and counted breaths under 5. We stood near the exit and kept eyes moving. Another patrol rolled up and the circle tightened again. Do you want medical? The officer watched my temple. I'm fine, I touched the lump and felt the heat. Mara answered no before the question reached her. We were both lying a little to keep control. One more form, one more short recap, one more signature. The work of danger is boring once survival lands. But a thought kept clawing at me through the paperwork. Next time we would not wait for permission to leave. The door banged open behind us and footsteps rushed our backs. Keep walking, I tightened my grip on her forearm and angled right. A phone camera floated near my cheek like a gnat. Turn around, hero, the voice came closer with fast shoes and swagger. 2 of his buddies boxed us to the curb and blocked space. One spread his arms and tried to look relaxed. The other circled toward Mara and smirked. I stepped between them and counted options out loud. Delete the clip and clear out, my hand stayed low and ready. Laughter, quick and mean, bounced off the storefront. Mara slipped her fingers into her pocket and waited. They noticed and their bravado faltered a hair. The filmer lunged a half step and probed my balance. I shifted weight and checked his lead foot. He jabbed the phone at my face for effect. I slapped it aside and he grabbed my sleeve. Careful, Mara's tone landed like a tap on glass. The circler decided to test her anyway and reached. She rotated her shoulder and angled away from his hand. He overreached and lost posture and I moved. I hooked the filmer's wrist and peeled the grip. He hissed and let go while the phone skittered. The other one flinched at the clatter and glanced down. Mara advanced into the gap and owned the space. Done playing, I marked the distance with 1 step. They tried to flank but lacked timing now. A patrol unit turned the corner slow and watchful. Their eyes darted to the street and back to us. Walked, I edged Mara toward the marked crosswalk. The filmer recovered and reached for the phone again. He hesitated between pride and caution and chose pride. He lunged and met my forearm square on bone. He breathed pain and folded his hand to his chest. The other swung wide and clipped my shoulder sloppy. Mara pivoted inside the swing and bumped his hip. He staggered sideways and caught himself on a meter. The unit's window cracked and a voice barked for space. They froze just long enough for the calculus to change. Mara looked at me with that fixed stare I knew. We had an exit and we had maybe 5 seconds. Across, I pushed off and we broke into a controlled jog. They followed 2 beats late and filled the crosswalk behind us. Traffic tightened and forced them to slow their chase. We reached the far curb and turned sharp toward the bus stop. A driver honked and the unit's horn answered. The buddies balked and weighed their next stunt. Mara lifted her phone and aimed at their faces. Keep coming, she said, and the dare hung there. They backed off a stride but kept mouthing tough lines. I tracked their hands and waited for the wrong move. The unit rolled up parallel and washed the sidewalk with authority. Our pursuers decided attention wasn't worth a medal tonight. Names, the officer inside requested them with a clipped tone. They offered shrugs and fake grins and nothing useful. The unit idled long enough to imprint the moment. Then rolled forward because bigger problems live everywhere. We didn't chase the victory because victory is a trap. We moved again and cut behind a closed kiosk. My head throbbed in a steady drum that demanded ice. Mara noticed and shifted to my uninjured side. "You with me?" Her palm pressed my shoulder once. "I'm here." The words tasted like grit and relief. She scanned the corners and checked our tail. No shadow moved, but I didn't trust quiet. A rideshare ping flashed on her screen and buzzed. 3 minutes, she breathed through the number like a rep. I measured the sidewalk and picked a wall with angles. We stood with our backs safe and our eyes forward. The buddies lingered far off and pretended not to stare. I pictured one cheap decision turning into paperwork again. Mara slid closer and kept the phone recording. I felt small, then honest, then ready to change. "I wanted to prove a point tonight," the words scraped out. She looked at me and didn't blink. That point nearly cost skin. Her jaw tightened on the thought. I let it land because denial breeds repeats. Our car pulled up and the driver started to wave. I held a hand low for one more scan. No movement from the watchers, only frustrated pacing. We got in and locked doors with the same breath. As we rolled away, I watched their shapes shrink. My pulse eased, but my mind stayed loud. Mara leaned back and kept the spray within reach. The ride home would not be a victory lap. The mirror filled with a scooter that refused to drop back. The rider matched every lane change like a metronome. "Not home," I told the driver, because patterns get you hurt. Mara angled her body and kept one hand near her pocket. The rider slid beside us and lifted a phone to the window. "Face me, champ," he knocked twice with a handle and grinned. I raised my own phone and shot his plate clean. The light turned and our car jumped forward hard. He weaved through traffic and kissed our bumper again. "Hospital entrance," I said, because security lives under cameras. Mara nodded once and braced her feet wide. The driver cut right and the rider tried to wedge past. He slapped the rear door and almost lost balance. I cracked the window 2 inches and spoke through the gap. "Keep tapping metal and you eat pavement," my voice held. He laughed and revved like noise could do damage. We swung into the ambulance loop and clipped a cone. 2 attendants pivoted and clocked the scene in one sweep. The rider saw uniforms and chopped the throttle fast. He belayed left and vanished behind a parked van. Out, I felt the need to move before he regrouped. We stepped to the curb as the car idled nearby. Mara scanned edges while I flagged the nearest guard. "We're being followed," I said, and my jaw throbbed again. The guard radioed and pointed us to a brighter corner. A black sedan rolled past, slow and tinted. My neck prickled and the window lowered 3 inches. A voice from inside whistled a tune I recognized. The passenger leaned out and filmed us without shame. "Wave for the channel," he smirked and adjusted focus. Mara lifted her camera and recorded him in return. The angle showed his wrist tattoo and a chipped tooth. "Police inbound," the guard's radio crackled with clip certainty. The sedan idled as if debating appetite versus consequence. I stepped where the plate was clear and took 2 shots. The passenger ducked and the car drifted toward the exit. They almost cleared the loop before a second car blocked. Security rolled a cart between them and the driveway. "Turn around," the attendant's tone had no patience left. The sedan paused and then gunned it over the curb. Tires squealed and a mirror snapped off in the scramble. They limped away and bled into traffic like cowards. I felt triumph for a heartbeat, then remembered the camera. That video would move faster than any report tonight. Mara touched my wrist and breathed through her nose twice. "I want structure," she said, and the word meant training. "Tomorrow," I answered, because delay writes reruns. She nodded and kept the can hidden but ready. An officer jogged up with a notebook and blunt questions. We gave times and directions and the plates we captured. He radioed the details and asked about pressing charges. Mara looked at me and then at the empty road. "File it," I said, because paper builds offense later. The officer handed us a card and warned about retaliation. I pictured doors and stairwells and pinch points at home. We would not walk blind into familiar hallways again. Our rideshare circled back under escort from the guard. We loaded fast and kept our eyes on the mirrors. Mara set a timer to check the feed for uploads. Her thumb hovered and then settled with firm intent. Halfway home, a message buzzed from an unknown number. A still frame filled my screen with my face mid-swing. Caption read hero wants clout and taglines piled underneath. Mara's jaw set and she typed 3 words I didn't expect. We leave town, she wrote, then met my eyes. Not forever, not running, a reset to break the rhythm. I agreed before fear found new angles to argue. Behind us, a scooter shape flickered again in distant glass. The scooter closed the gap and tapped our bumper twice. Change route now, I leaned forward and pointed at the ramp. Mara slid the can into her sleeve and kept her voice even. The driver nodded once and shot for the parking structure, cover and cameras. We barreled up 1 level, then cut the engine early. Tires from below screeched and the echo swallowed the floor. Out, I opened my door quietly and waved Mara left. We moved fast and used pillars as shields. Footsteps hit concrete and a mode. R idled near the ramp. 2 shapes peeled off the scooter and spread wide. They didn't talk, they scanned and paced, hunting openings. I felt the old brag die in my throat. Stairs, Mara whispered and angled toward the side door. The pair drifted toward us like they smelled the plan. I set my weight and drew them a step the wrong way. Mara slipped past the hinge and kept the door ajar. A boot kicked the door and the metal boomed. We slid inside and took the switchback stairs 2 at a time. They followed with heavy rhythm and sloppy confidence. I counted landings and listened for the 3rd set of feet. I pushed through the service corridor and checked the exits. 1 door opened into the lobby with a desk and cameras. The other led to a loading bay and blind corners. Lobby I chose because witnesses beat courage at 2 a.m. We stepped out and the clerk rose with sharp eyes. Trouble, his hands hovered near the phone like a draw. Call now, I flashed the plate photos and pointed back. The door banged again and our pursuers spilled into view. They slowed when they saw the lens tracking them. Wrong building, fellas, the clerk clicked the receiver and waited. They lingered just long enough to weigh stupidity against tape. Then they retreated a step and pretended boredom while circling. Mara didn't wait for permission, she took charge. Out the front with us behind you, she told the clerk. He drifted forward and boxed them from the desk angle. We edged along the wall and made the street. The scooter stayed parked but a sedan rolled by slow. The passenger lifted a phone and recorded from the window. I framed the plate again and took 2 clean shots. The sedan drifted off but not far enough for comfort. We held near the bus stop and kept our backs safe. Traffic moved like molasses and gave us cover anyway. An emergency unit turned onto the block and paused to look. Our watchers melted into doorways and waited us out. Train station, Mara said, and I heard resolve more than fear. We jogged to the corner and waved down a cab. The driver glanced at our faces and unlocked the doors. I closed my eyes for 1 beat and pictured the map. Halfway there, the sedan reappeared in the side mirror. I tightened the belt and told the driver the side entrance. Mara read my glance and texted the station security number. We rolled under the overhang and belayed before a full stop. Inside the hall, we changed directions twice to break the tail. A shutter clanged open on the left and drew eyes. We cut right and walked with purpose like we belonged. I felt their lens watching anyway and kept moving. Ticket kiosks lined the wall and another camera stared down. Mara handled the screen while I scanned the flow. 2 men drifted near with stiff smiles and clean shoes. Not the earlier pair, these smelled like management with edges. Problem with your accounts, one held up a badge wallet. Later, I held a hand up and kept my feet planted. The badge didn't match any agency I trusted. They closed distance and tried to funnel us toward a doorway. Mara changed tactics fast and raised her voice for the room. Harassment, she called, and heads turned in a wave. The 2 paused because attention ruins pretend authority. Real security jogged over and squared between us. Papers, the guard aimed the request at the pair. They hesitated and flashed badges again without opening them. The guard's chin lifted and his stance went heavier. I pointed to the cameras and smiled without warmth. The 2 backed off and disappeared into the milling crowd. We didn't celebrate, noise hides predators, not cowards. Mara grabbed my wrist and steered us to track 9. An outbound train signaled with a long blast that felt like hope. We boarded near the operator's car and stayed standing. Doors closed and the platform drifted away in slow motion. A figure lifted a phone and filmed us through the glass. I stared back and forced my face to look bored. The train moved and the city finally loosened its grip. Mara leaned on the pole and took a long breath. "Control what we can," she murmured and tapped 3 contacts. One rang through and left a clipped, factual voicemail. 2 stops later a group piled in with restless energy. No direct threat, just bodies and egos and thin patience. I shifted to give Mara space to pivot if needed. She noticed and adjusted her stance to match. A tall guy brushed her shoulder while squeezing past. He didn't apologize, he smirked like we owed him a lane. My jaw tensed, but my feet stayed disciplined. She looked at me and shook her head once. "Not this one," she mouthed, and I let it go. The old reflex to prove something finally lost. That loss felt like progress and caution at once. I filed the feeling because it would matter soon. We got off 2 stations early and doubled back on foot. The sedan couldn't shadow us underground forever tonight. We exited into a taxi rank and climb. "Add into the first airport," I told the driver, and trust settled with the word. On the way, my phone buzzed with a fresh tag. A still image showed my temple bruise with a caption. They were baiting me for an angry response and more views. I put the phone face down and watched the lanes. Near the drop-off, we spotted 2 men at the curb. Same stance as the badge pair and the same posture. They scanned arriving cars like fishermen watching floats. "Side door near freight," Mara told the driver, and he nodded. We slipped through a staff corridor and joined a check line. I felt a gaze and turned to see the filmer again. He stood beyond the rope with his lens at full height. Security waved him away and he tried to argue. "Document this," Mara handed our highlighted report to the officer. He skimmed the page and radioed for a supervisor. The filmer saw that and drifted back into the moving crowd. I watched his hands and waited for the lunge that never came. We cleared the checkpoint and found a bench near gate audio. Not to rest, to listen for names and last calls and changes. Our flight number rolled onto the board with a delay. I swallowed a curse and checked sightlines for problem spots. Mara tapped my knee and pointed to a family nearby. "Anchor near them," she said, and I understood her math. Predators avoid witnesses with phones and kids and noise. We settled on the edge with our backs covered. A cleaner passed and parked a cart between us and traffic. The cart created a shield and a narrow funnel. 2 men approached and then hesitated at the choke point. Mara raised the can slightly and kept her eyes soft. "Not worth it," I told the air, and imagined they heard. They veered off and pretended to study departure times. I memorized their gait and how the heels lifted early. Details save you later when faces blur. The board clicked to on time and the gate opened. The line formed and we tucked into the middle. A hand brushed my pocket and I trapped the wrist. The owner froze and tried to smile like a joke. "Wrong traveler." I released his hand and stared until he wilted. He vanished into the flow before staff could react. My pulse spiked and then settled into a clean rhythm. Mara squeezed my shoulder and we moved another step forward. At the scanner, a supervisor stepped in front of us. Quick questions, his accent was clipped and professional. He asked about the earlier report and the video harassment. We confirmed and offered the file numbers without slowing. He thanked us and waved us through with extra eyes. That felt like our best defense tonight, eyes and records. We walked the jet bridge with our shoulders loose for the first time. Relief is loud when you have been clenching for hours. Inside the cabin, we picked seats near the aisle and exits. We kept our bags under our feet and our hands free. A late passenger sprinted in and nearly ate carpet. He looked our way and then looked away fast. The door closed and the aircraft pushed from the gate. I watched the technician outside give a final thumbs up. Mara rested her head against my shoulder for a beat. I didn't relax, it was too early to relax. A message popped on my screen through the onboard network. A fresh clip showed the scooter circling our street. No faces this time, just the building and a timestamp. We were right to leave because the hunt had shifted home. Mara saw it and didn't flinch. "We report this now," she said, and opened the form. She attached the image and added the case number. She included our outbound details in case they needed proof. The safety demo rolled and we buckled up tighter. Turbulence warnings followed and the crew braced the cabin. The timing made my neck hairs stand up for no reason. I kept the can near my ankle and trusted the plan. During climb, a passenger moved quickly toward the lavatory. He brushed the attendant harder than needed and glanced back. My chest tightened without logic and then eased. He went in and came out and avoided our row. I finally let air leave my lungs in a slow stream. Mara looked at me and lifted an eyebrow, a silent check. "I'm here," I said, and felt the words land right. She nodded and closed her eyes for a minute. We leveled off and the cabin settled into a trance. I stayed awake and replayed the first shove from hours ago. Every choice since then marched across my skull in sequence. A new sequence grew beside it with cleaner answers. "Next time we leave at the first prod," I said. "Next time we plan routes before we order rides. Next time we don't argue with strangers pretending to be men." Mara pressed my hand and didn't ask if I meant it. The captain announced descent and the windows fogged slightly. I checked the aisle for anyone standing too soon. No one moved with bad intent, just impatience and sore knees. We touched down and rolled long because the field was busy. At the gate, the seatbelt signs chimed and bodies surged. W.E. waited 2 beats to avoid the crush and elbows. Then we slid into the stream and kept our heads moving. Another day was about to start with the same names online. Just before the door, I glanced at my phone again. A new notification blinked with a private link and a line. "We know your destination, see you in the lobby soon." My step faltered as the jet bridge yawned open ahead. I turned the phone so only we could see the threat. Mara caught the line and squeezed my wrist once. "Straight to the desk," she whispered and lengthened her stride. The jet bridge vibrated under a rush of impatient feet. 2 men stood past the door like they were waiting for family. Both stared too long at our row as we emerged. One lifted a camera and pretended to film the line. The other checked his watch and tried to look bored. "Keep walking," I shifted our bags to free my hands. Mara adjusted the sleeve with the spray and nodded. We merged with the crowd and used rolling suitcases as cover. The watchers drifted parallel and matched our pace by habit. At the terminal threshold, I pointed to customer service. "Ask about our connection," I said loud enough to carry. The pair stayed back when they saw 3 staff clustered. Predators hate clerks who write things down. We reached the counter and put the phone between us. "Harassment complaint already filed," I told the attendant calmly. "We need uniform presence at the lobby now." Her jaw tightened and she picked up the radio without hesitation. The 2 men hovered at the edge like mosquitoes near smoke. One scratched his cheek and angled his lens toward us. Mara lifted her own camera and caught his face head-on. He flinched and turned his shoulders to hide the tattoo. "Concourse security inbound," the announcement came over the station. I felt some of the buzz in my chest settle. That relief was temporary and I didn't trust it. We moved again because stillness invites strikes. Elevators ahead opened and swallowed a cluster of travelers. I steered toward the stairs where lines move faster. The men chose the lift and lost ground immediately. Small wins matter when everything feels like chase. Halfway down, a third figure joined from a side hall. He wore a hoodie with the strings knotted tight. He kept his head down and walked like a shadow. Mara glanced once and shifted to my right side. "Bank left at the carousel," I murmured under the noise. We hit the lower level and followed the flow. Hoodie stayed behind us, 2 steps too close for casual. I stopped short and he bumped my shoulder hard. "Back off," my face stayed expressionless and plain. His hands rose to chest level as if innocent. He smirked and stepped right to rejoin the pursuit. I let him pass and watched his gait for a tell. We reached the baggage area and positioned near cameras. Uniforms appeared at last and started scanning the floor. The first 2 men split apart and pretended to read signs. Hoodie veered to a bench and tied nothing at all. I walked straight to the closest officer and spoke firmly. "Same group from tonight, they sent this minutes ago." I showed the message with the lobby threat still glowing. He read it twice and signaled to his partner without blinking. "Stay where crowds are thickest," he gestured toward the center. "Do not approach the doors without us," crisp and direct. We obeyed because pride already cost us plenty. Mara's hand rested on my elbow and stayed there. The carousel started with a clank that made people look. Our watchers used the distraction to close distance again. The officer clocked the move and stepped into their path. IDs, he extended his palm and waited like a wall. One turned away and found his shoes fascinating. The other fished for a wallet and came up empty. Hoodie kept staring at a spot on the floor. The partner called for another unit and pointed at the exits. I angled us toward the information kiosk near the center. A rep smiled like this was normal morning traffic. "We need eyes on the lobby and the curb," I said. She tapped a screen and nodded once with purpose. The officer's radio crackled with a new instruction. "Hold them near the belts, team sweeping the entrance." We pivoted to keep line of sight on every approach. I breathed in fours and watched for hands, not faces. Hoodie rose and drifted toward a pillar, then paused. He scanned left, then right, then fixed on us. I stepped forward and blocked his sight lane with my body. He hesitated like a plan just lost a spare part. "Switch levels," Mara whispered, and my stomach agreed. We moved toward the escalator and forced the trio to commit. Either chase us up where guards waited or lose track. Commitment makes them sloppy, and we needed sloppy. They chose up and kept 20 feet of cushion. Halfway, Hoodie tried to slide beside a family. I stepped sideways and inserted our shoulders between them. He grimaced like a dancer who missed a beat. At the mezza, Nina sergeant and 2 more officers stood. They had that calm people get when they know the map. "With us," the sergeant said, and I felt my lungs widen. We followed through a service door into a control nook. Monitors showed every approach to the lobby and curb. The sedan from earlier idled under the awning like a shark. A driver leaned against the fender and scanned faces. 2 more associates shifted near the revolving door like chess pieces. "Do you want an escort to a different hotel?" the sergeant asked while marking positions on a tablet. "Yes," I answered before Mara could test another option. She looked at me and nodded with hard relief. The plan unfolded in direct steps we could follow. Team 1 would walk us to a service vehicle out back. Team 2 would stall the watchers with routine checks. Team 3 would follow at a distance in case of tails. We waited for the signal and kept eyes on the screens. Hoodie paced in a small box near the entrance. The camera caught his hand at his waistband too often. I felt cold anger and moved my stance an inch wider. Now the sergeant opened the door and we moved fast. A narrow corridor led to a freight elevator and beyond. We crossed a lit garage where 2 marked SUVs waited. Doors opened and we slipped inside with belts snapping. The convoy eased into a lane that bypassed the curb. On the monitor, a unit engaged the sedan with questions. Papers, insurance, simple stuff that eats time and temper. The driver argued and an officer smiled without smiling. We cleared the ramp and joined city traffic 1 block over. An unmarked car slid behind us at a comfortable distance. I watched the side streets for bikes or loose followers. Nothing immediate, just the hum of a city not sleeping. Mara unlocked her phone and opened our shared notes. "List the rules," she said, and it felt like ritual. I spoke them while she typed and corrected our language. Short sentences, clear boundaries, exit early, record everything. The radio crackled with a route change outside the district. We cut west and then south to bleed attention. The officer in front checked mirrors and spoke into his mic. "Still clean," he said, and I let one breath go. At the hotel, a manager stood with 2 guards at the hinge. They had our case number and our booking pulled up. "Private elevator," the manager offered with quiet efficiency. Doors opened and we moved directly to a floor with cameras. Inside the room, we didn't soften or collapse. We ran a drill like we practiced in the car. Exits labeled, cover points identified, calls queued. We kept shoes on because panic steals seconds. The sergeant's team waited in the hall for 10 minutes. "Lobby cleared," came the update through the door. The sedan got a citation and a polite escort away. Hoodie vanished before the first unit reached the stairs. We used the time to upload every clip to the case. Plates, faces, times with seconds, precise and boring. Boring is gold when the crowd wants a show. We named the account "Spreading the Worst Bait." A new ping arrived like a stone in a pond. A screenshot of our hallway appeared with a timestamp. Different angle, different lens, same intent to rattle. Mara and I froze for 1 beat, then moved. "Mirror cam," she whispered and checked for peepholes. We found nothing clever in the obvious places. She turned the shower on to block sound for a moment. I called the sergeant and kept my voice level and thin. "Send your tech," I said and gave the room number. They arrived with a small case and deliberate hands. They scanned frames and vents and the door edge. One knelt by the room service menu and smiled grimly. A pinhole lens hid behind a printed panel near the latch. Battery taped flat, transmitter cheap, range short. The tech lifted it with tweezers and bagged it twice. "Someone had a key or good fingers," he muttered. My throat went dry and I tasted metal again. Mara's face went blank and then focused like a scope. "We changed rooms twice and never touched the same elevator." The manager agreed and started the shuffle with urgency. We moved to a new floor through service corridors. Then to another with a decoy bag running interference. 2 officers rode empty lifts to confuse any watcher. We settled only when the tech cleared the 3rd room. I stood by the window and watched the drop-off lane. A delivery van pulled up and idled too long. A man stepped out with a clipboard and a baseball cap. He walked toward the front desk like he belonged there. "Check the name," I called to the guard outside. The desk verified there was no delivery for this floor. The man turned toward the door when the guard approached. He left the box and hustled back to the van quickly. "Block access to the stairwell," the sergeant ordered on radio. 2 guards rotated positions and posted near the hinges. The van rolled away with a lazy turn like nothing happened. I etched the plate in to memory because memory fails under stress. Mara sat on the edge of the bed and set the can beside her. Her hands were steady now, not bravado, just practiced. "Let go of the old script," she told me in a hush. I nodded because the old script nearly got us carved. We took turns showering while the team held the corridor. After, we debriefed with the detective on a safe line. He walked us through next steps with measured clarity. Restraining orders, evidence chain, jurisdiction contacts for cross-state reach. Sleep would not come, so we trained quietly instead. Grip break slow, angle steps, phone draw with clear voice. We timed our movements against an imaginary attacker's path. We repeated until sweat replaced tremor. Near dawn, the sergeant knocked once and leaned in. "One more surprise," he said and set a folder down. Inside were stills from the lobby cameras overnight. In one frame, the original jerk stared up at the lens. He stood just outside the doors with his eyes half closed. No friends this time, no camera, only stubborn ego. He waited 10 minutes, then left when a patrol car parked. The timestamp matched our elevator shuffle exactly. "He is stubborn, not smart," the sergeant observed softly. "That helps," I answered because I needed it to help. He arranged a morning lineup and a statement window. He promised a patrol swing by the airport routes. Mara rested her forehead against mine and exhaled. "Today we stop reacting," she whispered and set her jaw. "Today we set the terms with law and with habits." I felt the words plant and take root. We walked downstairs with the team for the lineup ride. The city outside stretched and looked almost ordinary. I knew better than to trust ordinary after last night. Ordinary is a coat fear wears in daylight. At the precinct, the process ticked forward in careful steps. They called us one at a time to view the screen. Faces appeared in rows and lingered under neutral light. I recognized the jawline that haunted the hallway messages. "Number 4, I said, and the room recorded my voice. Mara went in after me and picked the same number. The detective didn't cheer or frown, he just wrote. Writing means the machine is moving. On the way back, we stopped at a training gym. Not bravado this time, maintenance like rotating tires. We booked sessions for the month with short drills. We paid up front and asked for homework. The last message of the morning buzzed as we left. A final clip appeared with the caption "running out of steam." It showed their crew arguing with each other near a storefront. Views were down and comments cut against them for once. "Starve them," Mara said and put her phone on silent. We walked to the curb where the patrol waited to trail us. I looked up at the hotel roofline and counted cameras. I felt watched and safe at the same time. I don't believe in neat endings, not after this gauntlet. I believe in early exits and boring routines that save skin. I believe in speaking up before the hand lands on a wrist. We stepped into the car and scanned the mirrors anyway.